Welcome to Down in Bloomington, a conversational podcast about the rich musical history of Bloomington, Indiana. It's been over a month since I've released an episode of the podcast, and I'm really excited to get back into it with an interview with April Combs and James Combs from Arson Garden. If you went to shows in Bloomington between 1987 and 1994, you probably saw Arson Garden perform. They eventually went on to tour all over the United States. They toured Europe. They released 3 albums. They received a whole lot of critical acclaim. I got the chance to sit down via Zoom with both of them to have a conversation about Arson Garden, about their place in the Bloomington music scene, about the musical projects that they're working on today. They are 2 of the most gracious and kind people I've spoken to, and I'm looking forward to sharing the conversation with you. Before we start the conversation, though, I want to play their song, Two Sisters. Here's Arson Garden.
Let me make sure I don't have anything from him.
All right.
I don't have anything from him. No. We have this long family text thread, so sometimes.
So do I.
Yeah, you do.
Do you have several siblings, or is it?
I do. There are 5 of us, so James and I are the youngest of 5.
Right on. I'm the youngest of 8.
Oh, nice.
So a lot of times I can't even participate in the family text thread because they're talking about stuff that happened, long before I was around.
In the 1950s?
Yeah. But
I love that, though, about my family because I feel like it gave me a really rich musical history because my siblings were baby boomers, and then my parents were like World War II. Like my parents were born during the Depression in the 20s,
Same here.
And so, same. And so, we had my family was always singing. Like we didn't play music instruments together and stuff, but my parents always sang in the car.
That's awesome.
And so I know it was awesome. And so, and my dad loved to take drives. Right. That was kind of his thing. Like, let's go for a ride. He was the youngest of 11 children born during the Depression.
You had 3 older siblings, right?
Yeah, we have 3 older siblings.
Did you have that experience where they were turning you on to music?
For me, definitely. My sisters, James got a lot, but they were Beatlemaniacs, right? Of course they were.
Yeah.
But when I was a little bit older, like in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, my sisters were listening to Emmylou Harris, Dolly Parton. They were listening to Linda Ronstadt and Carly Simon. And so my friends were definitely not listening to that. They were listening to pop music like the Bee Gees, but I was listening to, these women singers who were very influential on me, Yeah.
When did the 2 of you start playing music together?
It was when I moved out to Boston for about a year and a half between my freshman and sophomore year in college. And then I came back. And I found Joby, and we started playing music together. And I think April and I might have been, we had this kind of idea maybe that we wanted to do something. But once I found Joby, then we were definitely sort of on the path. And we just kind of started talking about it, and I would kind of roped April into it. I think she wanted to do it, but she had just been doing a different kind of singing before that. And then we just kind of started stirring the pot together and making songs, and it came together pretty fast. I think we had a bunch of songs really within a few months. We had a set of songs. So I was the sort of probably instigator, but April was a willing participant, and we started playing together really right as Arson Garden began. That was when it started.
Yeah, we didn't really play music before. James was 3 years older than me, and when you're younger, that's a big leap. Like I was a freshman, he was a senior, so he had a band in high school, but I wasn't going to be singing for that band, because I was just a freshman. You know what I mean? The goats.
Fortunately for you.
I don't know. Your bass player was really cute.
When you were in Boston, did you pick up some of that jangly sound?
I'll tell you what it was. I went to, I always really liked kind of classic rock. I was kind of but I felt like I was very much sort of searching for my music when I was in high school. I loved Jimi Hendrix and the Who and the Beatles and and I sort of I kind of tried out proggy jazz a little bit, because I knew it was supposed to be good music, but I didn't really respond to it. And so I felt like I was sort of grasping at things, trying to find what my, just what my thing was. And then I moved to Boston in the middle of my sophomore year. I asked, and I was living with my sister Karen and her boyfriend, and they just had kind of all this music that sort of became my next, they just really had a big impact on me. It was it was like Leonard Cohen's greatest hits and the Soft Boys and Televisions for, Marquee Moon and the Roaches, or the first, the Syd Barrett's Pink Floyd, the kind of more like artistic music, I guess. And then they had a sort of more, Talking Heads records, like, and kind of, so all of that stuff really had a big impact on me. I mean, probably like, and then we had a guy who was married to our other sister for a while, who was a musically adventurous person. We lived in Indiana and was kind of going to high school, so he was always kind of bringing in like, check out the Joan Arbitrating record, check out this new band U2, on their second album, and so we were kind of growing up, like sort of super music fans, but it was really like kind of moving to Boston and kind of like just kind of listening to stuff that Karen's boyfriend did, checking out local bands. I worked at the Coop. I don't know if you know about the Coop. It's this like mega, kind of retail store in Harvard Square. But I was working in the textbook department, and like I got to know a bunch of people who were working in like the record department and the poster department and the book department, and they were all like sort of young bohemians, and they just kind of they have this cool scene going on over on Causeway Street near the Boston Garden, where they were putting on, like, they lived in, the classic 80s loft. Everybody was sleeping on like lousy beds, and putting on like Sam Shepard plays and having bands come play in their loft, and having like, people read their poetry. It was just kind of like, fertile environment for young people where everybody was sort of trying stuff out. So I had my first band. So Ricky, my sister's boyfriend at the time, when we started a band, we had like 4 or 5 songs that had like 5,000 parts, because we were super influenced by television. We were trying to make all these like kind of noodly songs, and so we had our one and only gig in Boston, and we put up a tape recorder in the back, right, and they turned it on, and we played our set, and we came back, we listened to our tape, and we're like, oh man, it sounds pretty good. And then we hear this guy come up and lean over the tape and go, this band sucks. They suck. They're so bad. They're the worst band I've ever seen. I mean, knowing that we were recording, just being me, funny and mean. I was very funny about it, but we went from like, to, So anyway, so when I came back, but I had the sort of, I think kind of like being exposed, to answer your question, being exposed to all the, it was sort of an in-between time in Boston. There were bands like Scruffy the Cat and the Del Fuegos, but Mission of Burma had sort of passed, and the Pixies hadn't quite happened, and the Throwing Muses. But when Throwing Muses came out, after I went back to Bloomington, I was very interested in them because I'd just been in that scene, and they were kind of had a big impact on us, and we liked. I really like the, kind of early REM records. Like, those guys were very, very dominant at that period, and I liked their kind of weirder, cool, like kind of arpeggiated songs, where they were like, things were kind of like a little strange and, arty. I like the strange and arty, Gang of Four, and the Clash. I really like those bands a lot. So the Jams,
right.
Sound Effects. Big record for me. So those are records that I like.
And I hear a lot of that in your music. And April, were you a freshman in college when Arson Garden started?
James was trying to teach me how to play bass my freshman year, and I'm a melody girl, is what I've come to learn. So bass wasn't going to happen for me. And then my sophomore year was when he talked me into being in Arson Garden, and I have to say, talked me into it because I had been in choir, like church choir, since I was like, I love to sing. It's my favorite thing in the world to do. And so James wanted me to sing in his band, and I was really kind of honored that he wanted me in it. But at the same time, like, it was intimidating because I had been in my high school musicals. I hadn't, and I'd been in show choir. I had been in choir. I'd never done anything like that. And it just was intimidating to be in a rock band. Like, I never had seen myself in that, like that, So, but he was like, well, you can do it. I know you can do it. I was young. I was only 19. So I just turned 19, I think. And so it was really a lot to take on, to join that scene, which I really never ever, I never felt cool. I was always kind of like a straight arrow too. Like, I was never like hanging out, drinking a beer, getting high. Like, oh yeah, we're going to go get high. I'm like, okay, we'll see you later. I was never interested in that. Arson Garden was kind of, I think, in that sense, like, we certainly weren't a straight edge band, but we were a pretty sober band in that respect. We were really serious about the art that we made. We wanted to be on it when we were on stage. You know, we didn't go to rehearsal and get high. We didn't go to rehearsal and like drunk. You know, we were at rehearsal to rehearse. You know, maybe people would go get a beer afterwards or something. I mean, I would drink a beer on stage, you know, as my drink, but you know, like I'm a one-hit wonder. Like I can drink one beer. I can smoke no pot and feel happy. Everybody else is happy and I'm not happy, so I don't do that. So anyway, all of that to say, it was a really intimidating idea to join a rock band, you know. But I mean, my big brother was there, so I felt okay, and I gave it a try, and it was like the most fun I've ever had in my life, being in that rock band, you know, and singing on stage, you know, pouring all that out into an audience and getting it all back. And the music that was written was fun and really challenging to sing. So it was exciting to think about what I could do with my voice in the way that everybody else was making up parts that would be interesting with the whole. It wasn't like the vocal line was just la 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 over the top of something. It was, you know, those were pretty wild parts, you know. And James wrote the melodies. I would kind of mess with them, but he would write them, and so, you know, he would hand me something pretty interesting, and then I would see what else I could do with it.
As a person being at the show, it was obvious that there was something different in not only the composition and the writing of the music, but also in the way that it was delivered.
Well, for one thing, I mean, we all of our songs were kind of made out of like riffs, you know, like we would sort of like and we like those kind of like circular nervous rhythms, you know. So we weren't really doing like kind of straightforward like chordy kind of songs. We have almost no song that were just made out of chords, which is weird because like all of my songs are made out of chords now as an artist. I've devolved, but kind of at that time we just, you know, we liked the little riff that went you know, and then we liked to like kind of try to find another guitar part that would sort of like weave around that. So we were all about the kind of, then the bass part would sort of weave around. So we liked the sort of swirling, you know, the kind of like everybody kind of, you know, and then like, you know, big bangs and parts. But, you know, that was sort of our trick when we started. You know, we'd have like these kind of little nervous riffs, but they would all be sort of like, our songs would be just sort of like a collection of like little, you know, kind of, I don't know, intertwining bits that kind of went in and out of, like I always loved like, you know, that about the Byrds, like the songs like, you know, Everybody's Been Burned. Like I like those kind of like, you know, minor kind of open chords with the like, or you know, the Simon and Garfunkel's, you know, Scarborough Fair, that kind of thing always really, you know, made a big impact on me. So I was always trying to kind of work stuff like that into Arson Garden. And our song, like a lot of our songs were minor key too. I mean, we did you know, that was like probably another thing that was just kind of different about us, you know. But I think one of the things that was cool about Bloomington was that, like, you know, I think maybe at the time we were like, is our town uncool? Like, I can't tell, but I like it, you know. But like because we had, like, I feel like because we were a little bit geographically isolated and the internet hadn't, like, you know, gotten its fingers into everything, like, it was sort of like everything was pretty homegrown, you know, so it was just kind of whatever collection of, you know, ladies and gentlemen felt like making music in Bloomington. It was just kind of whatever like came to them through Ozarka or whatever. There wasn't really like a sound of Bloomington. I think, well, I guess maybe like the surf thing. I mean, but I didn't know other scenes were, you know, had bands that were like, you know, heavily influenced by Dick Dale comes down and he's like a hero, right? He probably plays everywhere else and, you know, people like him and everything. He comes to Bloomington, he's like a god, you know. And I thought that was really cool about Bloomington. You know, it's like, I think everybody, you know, our scene wasn't a bunch of bands that sounded the same, you know. Yeah. It was a bunch of people who were kind of like, you know, grabbing, you know, disparate things in the culture and then sort of making their bands out of it. And our band was like that. It wasn't really like, I mean, I think I looked up to like the Dancing Cigarettes, who, at the time I only knew through cassettes and stories, but like I appreciated their arty spirit, and that was something I really related to about them. But the way we made music was sort of just different animal, pulling from different things.
Where was? Do you happen to remember the first show that you would have played in Bloomington? And was it your first show ever?
You mean for Arson Garden? Or
for Arson Garden.
Oh, for Arson Garden, yeah, it was Night. It was Night. Would that have been 86 or 87, April?
87.
Yeah. Because I had the Figments the year before. Like I had a band, like a bunch of like nervous boys, like playing, television cover, like playing the world's weirdest version of Marquee Moon, and then a bunch of like, songs about our feelings, but it never really came together. Everybody was very like smart and artistic in that band and went on to do interesting things, but we didn't really know what we were doing as a band,
It's very true. Everybody in that band has gone on to be successful.
Pretty interesting, but we had already kind of like gotten some gigs at Second Story, so I knew David Miller a little bit, and I knew like kind of enough to like be able to, and some of the people who were like into the music scene. So, and do you remember those Night things? Like the Denise Self used to kind of be the organizer, and that was like a beautiful thing that I don't know if I've ever seen anything that was quite like it in other places that I've lived, where it was kind of this way, there was this real desire in the community to get together and share stuff, so it would be kind of like just everybody would just do whatever it was they did. If they played, like if they had a poem they wanted to read, or they had a little comedy bit they wanted to do, or if they wanted to play the accordion, or they had a new band, like us, So when we saw that was coming, and that our time slot was just, like enough for like 4 songs, then that was a great way for us to start, because we were still kind of getting it together. I think Clark had maybe just joined the band, so that was kind of how, like, that was our first gig, and we got supported just kind of right out of the gate. I think we, because the room was full of people, like everybody in town went to those things. So when we played, everybody who didn't go home before midnight or whatever it was we went on heard us, and so we have this kind of like very like kind of enthusiastic, present audience. We didn't have to sort of start by playing to nobody. We played for a bunch of people like right away, and I think that we just kind of connected, and they sort of saw something in us, and we were like, oh, we can do this feels good to us, and and it was just a spirited community. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Like, you can be a great anything, and if nobody is there to support it, then it doesn't matter. So I think the moment was ripe. I think everybody was very excited to like kind of ready to discover some music, and that we had some music that was, I think was worthy of discovering. And, and the Zulu Beatniks, I think, arrived right at the same moment, and they were like kind of like a funk band again. Here we are sort of all growing in the same, environment, but just pulling from different stuff. But they had this kind of like, funky rock band that was great. I loved them. I mean, I think they were one of the coolest bands that I've ever seen in Bloomington, but they didn't last very long. We sort of kept it going for longer, but I loved them.
I'd be curious to know from both of you if you found the music community or the scene, and whatever you want to call it, to be kind of accepting, or did you find that it was kind of divisive, or were you able to kind of show up amongst these disparate bands and feel like you were part of that scene?
I mean, I did. I loved all those people, I mean, I still do. I felt, I really admired all the other musicians in town, I mean, and the music there they were making. I loved going to those shows. I was always like, I was always up in the front, I loved going to see just, all the different bands that were going on in town. So for me, I think it was really positive. I remember, Tommy Shover had a thing about me, and I never quite knew what to make of that, because I I really admired Tommy Shover. So I couldn't figure out why he was giving me such a hard time. Um, but I just tried to laugh along, because what are you going to do? The haunting voice, and I didn't have any control over what people said about my voice in the press, but at the same time, like I thought it was funny,
I was always
it was funny. Tom was funny,
always confused by that as well, and I always thought that had to be a bit.
I think Bloomington's a nice town. People are nice, so I think that's part of it. We were all friends. We were all the same age. You just see everybody every day. Like how hard is it to kind of hate somebody because you hate their band or something, like you're jealous of their band, but there they are, Kirkwood. There they are bussing my table. There I am bussing their table,
Yeah. We were all like, we were all just kind of like, working at the Rinse Stone or the Uptown Cafe. We were all just sort of scraping by together, like living in tiny apartments and like, and making no money. So it's not like, anybody, the only person who was living an opulent lifestyle in Bloomington through music was John Mellencamp,
Yeah.
And the people that played with him and recorded with him, and, good for them for doing that. But I felt like, my feeling about everybody is like whether or not they really truly liked our band, they were always really cool and nice to us and like, treated us well. And like, so I never felt like, and I loved everybody's band. I loved Glenn Hicks's music, and I loved like the Walking Ruins, and the Rosebloods, and like, there was all like really good stuff. So I think, I don't know, whatever people felt about our kind of weird arty band, like they were always nice to us and cool to us and come to see us, and like, but I felt like a lot of our support was sort of, was kind of maybe some, like interesting folks around town that maybe weren't as musician-y people as much. And then like university people like really supported us, like we had like, kind of a lot of, I don't know, just like kind of sort of more sort of some student-y people, our student-y friends, but it's like when you live in an environment like that and you sort of travel in it and work in it for a little while, you just know everybody in town. And so it was sort of like, somebody's doing something tonight. It's a nice thing about Bloomington. Like when we moved to like the city, you could just go indulge the specifics of your taste anytime, anywhere. But in Bloomington, you have like 3 things going on that month. And if you miss one of them, you missed the opportunity to like see everybody, like, so like, if it's CJ Chenier, then it's CJ Chenier. If it's like, Speed Luxury, it's Speed Luxury, and I love that. I love that about Bloomington. It made me kind of go expose myself to maybe more stuff than I might have sought out if I was just being a snobby rock person,
Absolutely. There's a lot of folks that I talked to today that remember you all from back then, and a lot of them, it was really important to them to have a band with a woman in the front that was, the front person in a band, and that still resonates with them today.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say, as a woman fronting the band, like we would go on tour, and I wouldn't see women. I mean, you never. It was definitely challenging. I mean, I think I was pretty lucky because my brother was in the band and my boyfriend was in the band. I was always excited to play with other bands that had women, and a lot of times the band that would open for us would be the one band in town that had a woman singer, right?
Right.
As you said, it's Women's Singer Night in St. Louis.
Right.
Like
right.
the 2 bands.
We've got one of those. But, and to be in like the back rooms, I mean, it's just like how many penises can be scrawled on one wall, it's just like, okay, we would kind of joke like, well, this was a 19 penis club, or this was a 47 penis club. That was my running joke. I had a bunch of them because,
I can only imagine.
coping mechanisms. But it was important to me as a woman. Like I know when we were making our first video, you know, they wanted me to be, the guys that were filming it wanted me to be kind of vulnerable, kind of like crazy, you know, like, we want you to smear your lipstick. And I was just like not having it, you know, like I can't say that I was, I can't say that I was super confident, you know, to like stand up for myself the way that I think women are much more able to do now, you know. I was still raised by a World War II mom, you know. I couldn't be comfortable being represented as like the crazy girl or anything other than kind of empowered. And, you know, I mean, one of the things I loved about being in my rock band was when I was on stage, you know, I had the mic. I was the commander, you know, like, and I wasn't like I was trying to command the crowd, but I knew it would be much more interesting. I'd been to enough performances and seen enough people be nervous and scared and to sing to know that like nobody wants that. You know, what everybody wants in the audience is for you to be awesome, be great, like to do great, to be like completely empowered, to feel really confident and to sing with everything you've got, right? Like that's what makes the show fun. You know, that's what makes the performance exciting, is when the band is like giving it out and they're not holding back. And so for me, that's what I just really tried to do, was to just completely show up. And I didn't try to show up like a woman or a man necessarily. Like I wasn't trying to be sexy. I wasn't trying to be even cool or pretty. I was just trying to put on a good show, you know? And, you know, the people that I watched on stage that I found fascinating were like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, or, you know, just how they were just like, wow, you know, they came out and they just hit you with everything. And so even though, you know, I'm not Anthony and I, you know, and I didn't want to be like, I knew that was that energy, when I found it, my version of that would be what we all wanted, who I wanted to be, who they wanted to see, that we would have fun, that we would have all leave having had fun and having had like been a rock show, you know, boom, I gave it to you, everything I had.
What, was Two Sisters your first video that you all shot, or was there one prior to that?
No, it was Two Sisters.
Yeah. What was it like?
Yeah, that was the one that got paid for. We made one. April, do you remember the All Talk video that Chris Young made for us over at the university?
Well, now that you say it, of course I do, James.
No, it must be. Yeah, no. I mean, it was a funny thing. He just put us in a studio. I think maybe the first two songs that we had recorded over with, I don't know, in the Wayne Jackson program, and we made one there. But yeah, Two Sisters is the one that we like had a record out, and that was the music video for it.
When did you all start to realize that you weren't just a local band or even a Indiana band, that there was, you know, something happening bigger?
I think it was when we did that first tour of Europe and we got a Peel session showed up on our itinerary, and we were like, oh wow. And I had a friend who was over there who was living in England and wrote me and said, hey, I'm hearing you on the BBC, you know, like John Peel is playing you, and like, you know, other people are playing you. So we were really, I think maybe that was kind of like, that was a sort of a big wow kind of moment. But I don't know, you know, we never really like, you know, we saw, like, we toured like 36 states and 5 European countries. I mean, we went all over the place, but we were really like slugging it out. It wasn't like we were playing big, you know, enormous arena, you know, or even like auditorium sized shows. You know, we were playing, it was all at the club level. But we had towns where we were really going over. We would really go over in Chicago and really go over in Minneapolis and really go over in Madison. Like, you know, we had like places that we played. But, you know, the rock scene was pretty frag. I mean, there was a lot of enthusiasm, but town like Bloomington was really where you wanted to be, because like that was where kind of like group. There was pockets of like enthusiasm for live, new live bands, but that was, the Midwest. It's like, that wasn't everywhere, it's like, but we kind of played everybody. We played in Muncie, we played in West Lafayette, we played in Indianapolis a bunch of times, and like Louisville, we used to play in Lexington, and I don't know, we tried Cincinnati, we played everywhere around,
Yeah.
Like, we were pretty ambitious about going to Columbus. We were pretty ambitious about going out and doing it. St. Louis, we played a lot.
We didn't play in Columbus.
Yeah. Oh, that was the place that we
never played in Columbus.
Well, no. You know what? We got booked there, and that was the one that we kept canceling. Remember? Do you remember when we can't, like, we had...
No, that was Akron that we canceled.
Was it Akron?
No, Norca, remember?
Yeah.
It was Akron. We had a good following in Akron. We were on our way. That was like our last show. We were on our way to Akron. Wasn't that our last show or second last show?
Yeah.
We were on our way to Akron.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, I don't want to go.
That was the moment we gave up. Like,
but, and we had a good following, and they were really mad at us because we had a good following in Akron. We also had a good following down at like Einstein and Go-Go's in Jacksonville, Florida. We would go there often. Florida liked us. We had a bunch of good shows in Florida, again and again. I think the thing that was true for us, I love Swanee. One of the things that was true, I feel like when I talk about us going on tour, it was always like, we'd have a great show, and then we'd have an okay show, and then we'd have a show where 2 people would show up, and then we'd have a great show. And, so it was just like, it was so uneven. It'd be like, we'd play in Florida. So we'd play like 4 or 5 shows in Florida. Florida had a good scene and like a good sort of circuit. And so we'd get on that. So we'd do Florida, and then we'd drive over to New Orleans. We did that kind of a lot, like drive along that panhandle, because Joby's family lived in New Orleans. So it was a great place for us to have like a little break. And, but then we'd go play like in Mississippi, and we'd have like a terrible show. We could tell stories about Mississippi. And then we played Tipitina's in New Orleans, which is like, how cool is that? So it was just like, it was just always like that. Yeah. Right. So we'd have like, it's like feast, famine, mid-sized meal, famine, feast. It was just, so I felt like, I think that when we didn't go to Akron, I think we were just tired of chasing the carrot. It was like, oh, maybe we'll get a record deal. I mean, the music industry was so complicated at that time. If you remember, there was one Rough Trade, right, that went under in the middle of our music career, which you wouldn't think affect us. We weren't on Rough Trade, but it was like all this, all the indie rock labels just blew up and died, and it was just so exhausting. We were on 3 different labels. Our last label seemed like it was just going to be awesome, and then it just like died. It was like somebody from Atlantic who'd been like a big A&R person at Atlantic. He'd signed like Tori Amos, and it's like, oh, this is going to be great. And we made our last record we were really excited about.
Well, we made it.
He never paid the bills.
We were at Pachyderm in Minnesota, which was like where Nirvana made In Utero, and PJ Harvey had made Rid of Me. And it was a cool, lovely studio out in the woods of Minnesota.
Really cool.
Kind of modern, the kind of like, modern house that we were staying in. And it was like, with like a little babbling brook, and it had a little Japanese bridges. It was an incredible place, And then the mics and the gear and stuff was incredible. And we were like most of the way through making our record, and we got the message that just like, that they submitted the invoice and it had not been paid. And if we didn't if the guy didn't come through by tomorrow, we were out of there, and we didn't and all of the work that we were done was going to be held hostage until he paid. We were like, oh, that's not good. And so we kind of all jumped through those hoops for a while, and then it got paid, and then we finished, and we went to Mellencamp's studio, and we got to do something there for, we had to do our last week there, and all the people there were really nice, but, there was always that sort of specter of Joe's not going to pay the bills, and then we're going to end up with egg on our face and get thrown out of here, Can I tell you a funny aside about the Mellencamp studio experience? Well, the first few years I lived in Los Angeles, I worked for this show that was like, it was kind of like a hybrid, KCRW and like AOL music show. And it sort of morphed into this video show. And I had started off as a production assistant, but by 2004, 2005, I was producing the West Coast sessions for that show. And so we are going to have Mellencamp is going to come in, and we're in Capitol Studios, the amazing Capitol Studios, and the video crew is there, and he kind of comes in, and it's him and Elaine, and and we have this very lovely woman who is our kind of like our video village, kind of the interface person with the video crew, and he really liked her and sort of took her, and everybody likes her. She's a really charming, lovely human, but beautiful woman, right? So he likes the beautiful blonde woman, and he's barely talking to me. Like, I'm the producer of the session, and usually I'm kind of like the one who's kind of telling everybody how it's going to go, and he doesn't want to talk to me, right? And so, but after a little while, I kind of come up to him. I'm like, hey, John, I'm from Bloomington. We're from the same part of the world, and. I just wanted to tell you, I don't think we ever got a chance to thank you for letting us, come out and record at Belmont Mall. It was a really cool experience, and we thought it was really generous of you to allow this local band to come in and and play in the studio. And his response was, "I never heard of you." It's like nobody records in that studio. Nobody records in that studio. What are you talking about? And we were like, we'd always just kind of through the years thought that it had been such, and maybe it had, and he had just forgotten about it. But he was very surly about it. I mean, everybody else, in his circle, were as cool and nice as they could be. They loaned us their gear. We got to play through their beautiful amps. I mean, it was a lovely, lovely experience. But I don't know if
I think Mike Wanchuk and Tom Herbers worked that deal out. I think I remember that it was kind of like, don't touch anything.
We flying
and slide now.
But I just remember, when he said that, I was like, oh, what do you say? It's like, I never heard of you. Nobody records that. What are you talking about?
Do you all feel like the sound of the Bell Stomp was a lot different than the previous albums leading up to that?
I think it was. I think we were more mature. I think we were. I think we just evolved. I would say my favorite record is Wisteria. There's just some songs on there I just love, and I love the guitar. I love the guitars on Wisteria. I just love them. They just sound freaking great. But I think the interplay of all the instruments is clearer in on the Bell Stomp. I think the Bell Stomp has more. It's got some quiet songs, which are, unusual for us. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I was listening through them the other day because I was like, oh, I'm getting interviewed about Arson Garden. I better, tune up. And I do listen to, my kids. I saw 2 daughters who are in their 20s. And then, I'm married to Michael, who was the guitar player. So my daughters just are like, man, we are such a cliche. Our parents used to be in a rock band and then they fell in love. But the funny thing to me is that they'll turn their friends onto it. So they'll say, oh, my parents used to be in a rock band. And they'll be like, no, really, they were in like a real rock band. They were on MTV, they toured, they put out records, and their friends will be like, oh, we want to hear it. Yeah. And then, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Music, and then their friends will become like new fans of Arson Garden. They're like, hey, we really like that. My daughters will be like, oh yeah, they really like Of Two Minds. My friends really like that song. I'm like, when I was a college professor for a while, and my college students, I had like a little gang of college students who were Arson Garden fans too, which was kind of funny.
Did any of them get a hold of any merch, or do you ever see Arson Garden T-shirts? Or
I do, because one of my daughters has been wearing one, which cracks me up. She's in Japan wearing an Arson Garden T-shirt right now.
That's great. When you started making that shift towards bigger labels looking at you, did it affect your ability to play shows in Bloomington? Did you find that you weren't so able to be the local band in Bloomington?
Oh, no. No, it was fine. I think we tried to kind of space it out so we didn't we weren't playing every weekend, nobody would come see us because they were sick of us, so we would try. I think the last few years we just would do a handful of shows in town and try to make them like something special and fun. But no, I think Bloomington always supported us really well. No, I don't think. I think that was really the overexposure thing was the only thing that we were ever really kind of concerned about, and everybody getting tired of us because by the time we broke up, we'd been around for like 7 years. Everybody who wanted to hear us, had plenty of chances to hear us. And who do you go see? What band do you go see like 30 times? It's like I don't go see anybody that many times, even if I love them. It's like we all come.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing about us touring, I think the one thing that Arson Garden maybe did that helped the scene was that because we were kind of ambitious about getting out of town. We've sort of followed the Rosebloods around for a while. When we first started playing, we would go and open for the Rosebloods in like Louisville, or we would go open for the Rosebloods in Indy, and that was just really the Lisa Sorg, John Terrell connection, if you know what I mean. So, because Lisa was our manager, so she would book us those shows, and and John, we would have so much fun when we would play those shows with those guys. I think because we were ambitious, we sort of showed people like, oh, you know what, you can play out of town. And then I think it helped people get more ambitious about what they might do, or maybe they did want to get a label. When we signed to our first label with Community 3, which was just like this super dinky label that was in Brooklyn when Brooklyn was not cool. I remember people saying that we were selling out. That was just it's just such a punk rock attitude, right? Like that if you had a penny and you might not get to keep your penny, that was cool. But if you had a dime, that was like way too much, like who do you think you are? I loved that about Bloomington. And just as an aside, I remember noticing in Bloomington that like anybody that was pretty punk rock that would move to Bloomington, like within 6 months, they like maybe they still had their mohawk, but they would also be wearing a tie-dye,
But I want to at least hear from both of you what you all are doing in music now.
Sure, I'll go first. So, I never really was a writer in Arson Garden other than to kind of write part of my vocal parts. So it's kind of funny when I was a kid, I'm really dyslexic. And so my teachers always said, well, you can't write. And it took me a really long time to figure out that actually I'm a writer, and I'm a pretty good writer. So, I've been writing songs now. James and I had a band called Honeycombs for a while that we loved and had so much fun with. It was like harmony. It was great. I loved doing that. But then he had a kid, and did you know he lives in Los Angeles and I live in Cincinnati? So it's a little bit hard to have band practice that way. You can see my internet connection's not great. And so I started writing for children. And I remember when I became a mom and people kept saying, well, you're a songwriter, you should write for children. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not going to write about juice boxes and underpants. Like, I'm not interested in that, which is what everybody writes about for kids, right? And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And then I had this kind of little moment where I realized like, oh, I do have songs to write. And so they're really more about like nature and they're fairy tales really, and pixies and fairies and things like that. So I write songs like that. Kind of, in a lot of ways, they're just like old English folk songs in a certain way, But I've been writing more bluegrass kind of songs lately. I play Irish music, and I was talking to one of my friends about Irish music, and she said, I just wish we'd grown up in one of those Irish families where they all play music together. And I was like, yeah, me too. And then I was like, Well, I did grow up in a family that plays music together, but we really played like country music. Like if we played anything, it was like Johnny Cash or something, you know? And I was like, well, that's really cool. Actually, I think I should stop playing Irish music or play less Irish music and start getting back into my, bluegrass roots. So Carter family. So I am writing a big batch of songs right now. I plan to put out a new album it's called April 8 Songs and Stories. I have a podcast that has about 60 episodes of my songs and stories out there for free.
What's the name of the podcast?
It's called April 8 Songs and Stories. And so I have a lot going on actually in music.
I'm actually putting out a new single in 2 days. It's called High Pine Steeples. I did it with a band called the Well Pennies in Des Moines, because I moved to Los Angeles a while back to kind of have a whole life in music rather than just sort of be kind of doing it on the side while I'm trying to do some work to make money. So I figured, I work with a music supervisor on film and TV stuff. I'm starting to do some music supervision myself. And I have a sync licensing company. I pitch music for film and TV placements and take commissions on things that I make happen. And then I've just kind of kept my artist life going. I have I've been doing this kind of like dual life where I have a band called Great Willow that does like a kind of like, I don't know, maybe like birdsy lineage, artistic music kind of. And the harmony is all about harmony singing. And then I just do like solo stuff. I've been doing more kind of solo stuff lately. And I'm sort of putting this record out, this single out with Well Pennies called High Pine Steeples in 2 days. It's going to be gets its video premiere tomorrow on Americana UK. And then, there's just this really nice kind of scene of like, I don't know, songwritery people out in Los Angeles that kind of do like, maybe what we would call Americana music, cowboy hat music. And it's really thriving and the people are really nice. So I kind of feel like I've tapped into like another just nice, like supportive music scene. And I'm very grateful to kind of be involved in that. And I'm starting to try to do more stuff with like Folk Alliance and kind of just reach the wider world that way. But I'm really like, I'm married and I have a son, so I'm not like kind of out beyond the Los Angeles all that much doing it, but I'm doing it very like, I put out an album last year called Falling Under Spells. I'll probably have great people that I play with. I could easily make another record. I've got plenty of songs. I write tons of songs somehow. I'm absolutely doing it all the time. I mean, if you want to see what I'm up to, you can go to jamescombs.com, and there I am.
We will wrap up, and I want to thank both of you for sharing your experience with Bloomington's music. And I don't think that you can talk about Bloomington's music scene in that era without talking to you all. So,
thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for caring about it.
I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do that.
Yeah, well, thank you. We really appreciate you. I don't know, just like shining your light on us and caring about it.
Yeah. It's nice.
Used to do, but like we loved it and we loved our town in that era, and I think it was kind of a golden era in Bloomington. It was certainly fun for us. Who knows? If anybody's ever, you never know if anybody's going to ever care about it. So thanks for caring about it.
Thank you.
Thank you both for sharing your stories, and it's been cool to talk to both of you and hear a little bit about your take on Bloomington's music scene.